Now we are going to start up with a very important aspect of our body, that is the respiration. As you all know that for our survival, respiration is very important, very important. Like if sometimes you feel if you feel suffocated due to any reason, you know that it actually give you a feeling of dying, because we cannot actually survive without breathing. We cannot survive without the respiration. That is very important. But as I was like introducing a chapter to you, so I use respiration term also, I use breathing word also. So you must be thinking, like in your practical life also, sometimes you will be using a respiration, sometimes you will be using a breathing. But actually, you know, these two terms are actually two different terms. They are not exactly same. They are actually two different terms. There is a lot of difference that exists between the respiration and breathing. So before we take up the few elaborated topics for the respiration, what are the mechanisms and all, what are the respiratory organs, before we start with it, I just want you to make you familiar that what is the difference between the respiration and the breathing. Because you talk to your friend or somebody, so sometimes you use respiration, sometimes somebody is using breathing, but two terms are actually differ from each other. So we are just going to see the difference between the two, that what difference actually exists between the two. So here I am going to write about breathing, and the other thing that we are going to consider is the respiration. See, breathing is actually an exchange of gases. Breathing is actually, it refers to just a exchange of gases. That means, as you all know, like if we consider ourselves, so we know that we take in oxygen and we give out CO2. So that means it is just merely an exchange of gases. For what purpose you are using this exchange, or why you are inhaling this gas, or why you are exhaling this gas, breathing doesn't have to do anything with it. It is simply an exchange of gases. That means you are taking in oxygen and you are giving out CO2. What are the mechanisms involved, or for what purpose you are taking in O2, and from where you are producing CO2? Breathing doesn't means it is not confined to those processes. It simply means exchange of gases. Taking in oxygen, giving out CO2. If you are talking about ourselves, then intake of O2 and giving out CO2, just this merely the breathing means. But you know that respiration actually means intake of oxygen, that means taking in oxygen, then using that oxygen for oxidation of food. Then we use oxygen for oxidation of food. So here it involves actually the use of oxygen. So what we are going to do is, we have the food, we are going to oxidize the food, and as a result we get CO2 and energy, that is carbon dioxide and energy. And then this carbon dioxide produced is given out. So we say giving out CO2. This is what is the respiration. So I think you got it, that there is a lot of difference. One point I have already stated in front of you, that it is an exchange of gas and it is an intake of oxygen, using it for breakdown of food, and as a result we get CO2 and energy. We use energy, you know that we need energy for carrying out the metabolic processes, and then the CO2 produced is just given out. There are a lot of differences more. Breathing is actually a non-cellular process. It is actually a non-cellular process. None of its aspect is taken up in the oxygen in the cell. It is not occurring at the cellular level. But respiration is a cellular process. Many of its reactions or steps occur in the cell. So it is a cellular process. Moreover, it doesn't produce any energy. No energy is produced. As I just introduced you with breathing, I just told you that exchange of gases. I didn't mention that it is producing any kind of energy which you can use it. But here it is actually producing the energy. So as a result of respiration, energy is produced. Energy is produced. Moreover, there you can say that no enzyme involvement is there. No enzymes are involved. That means enzymes have to do nothing with the breathing. But there are many enzymes that are involved in case of the respiration, that we will be taking up when we will studying the mechanism and all, and cellular respiration and all. You will see that many of the enzymes, they are involved in the respiration, but they have to do nothing with the breathing. And moreover, you know that breathing is simply a physical process. Just exchange of gases. just a physical process, but it is a physiochemical process. It is a physiochemical process, or we can also call it as biochemical process. Now, why I'm calling it physiochemical? Because you have seen that it is just concerned with the exchange of gases also, and here there is a chemical reaction also. So we say that it is physiochemical process, and moreover, as I told you, that it involves enzymes also. So those processes in which, those chemical reactions in which there is involvement of enzymes, that is called as biochemical process. So we can use either term, both means the same, that is physiochemical or biochemical. So I think you got it, that there is a lot of difference between the breathing and the respiration. This is very important because most of you just miss this concept, but this is very important. You need to take into consideration that exchange of gases is simply breathing. Intake of oxygen, using it for oxidation of food, and giving out CO2 is respiration. It is non-cellular, it is cellular process. No energy is produced as a result energy is produced. No enzymes are involved, physical process, and it is a biochemical process. So this is what is the breathing and the respiration. Now it's time to take up respiration in detail. So we'll just take the respiration first, then we'll come with the mechanism of breathing also. So as I told you that when we talk about respiration, so you can actually define respiration, that respiration involves three things. One is intake of oxygen, second is using it for oxidation of food, as I already told you about the reaction, that it is food plus oxygen giving rise to CO2 plus energy, and then release of CO2. That is the respiration. So now when we talk about the respiration, you know that there are two types of respiration. There are two types of respiration. One is aerobic, other is anaerobic. One is aerobic respiration, other is anaerobic respiration. Now what is the difference that exists between the two we are taking up now? These are very important. So the one which do aerobic respiration, they are called as aerobes, and the one which do respire anaerobically, they are called as anaerobes. So they are aerobes and they are anaerobes. Now we are going to take up in detail that what actually the difference that exists between aerobes and the anaerobes. So the first is the aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is the one in which the respiration which occur in the presence of oxygen. So aerobic respiration is that which take place in presence of oxygen. That is the aerobic respiration. So and the one who actually carry out aerobic respiration, they are called as aerobes. They are called as aerobes. Now see what happens in this case. You know that the common form of food which is stored in a body, that is glucose. Glucose is the common form of food in which the food is actually stored in the body. So what happens? Glucose gets converted into pyruvic acid. Glucose gets converted into pyruvic acid. For this conversion, the oxygen is not required. For this conversion, oxygen is not required. So you can say that it is independent of oxygen. This process is independent of oxygen. Whether the oxygen is present, whether the oxygen is not present, it has to do nothing with it, because it is an oxygen independent process. And the name for this process is glycolysis. The name for this process is glycolysis. See, glyco means glucose, lysis means breakdown. So glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose into pyruvic acid, oxygen independent process. And you know that where does it take place in the cell? It takes place in the cytoplasm. It takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. You must be familiar that cell membrane, the liquid thing is cytoplasm. So it is happening in the cytoplasm. Then afterwards what happened? This pyruvic acid in presence of oxygen, because in aerobic respiration we have oxygen. So after converting into pyruvic acid in presence of oxygen, it gets converted into energy, and energy is in, you all know that it is in chemical form, that is ATP. 38 ATP plus carbon dioxide plus a vapor is produced. And you know that the conversion of pyruvic acid in presence of oxygen into energy, CO2 and vapor, this process is oxygen dependent process. It is oxygen dependent process. As you have seen that here we have used the oxygen, and moreover the name for this process is the Krebs cycle. It is the Krebs cycle. And where does it take place? It takes place in an organelle called as mitochondria. It takes place in an organelle that is mitochondria. You know that mitochondria is like this. You have a rod shaped structure present in the cell like this. This is the mitochondria. And you know that mitochondria is also called as powerhouse of cell. And you know that what is the reason behind? Because see, whenever you need to run something, you need a power. Here also to run a body, a human body, we need a power, and that power is an energy, and energy comes in the body in a chemical form, that is the ATP. And what is the full form? It is adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. So this is aerobic respiration. So you have seen that aerobic respiration takes place in presence of oxygen. What happens actually? Glycolysis occur followed by Krebs cycle. Glycolysis is taking place in cytoplasm, oxygen independent process in which the glucose breaks up into pyruvic acid. Then it is followed by the Krebs cycle in which pyruvic acid in presence of oxygen break down to form 38 ATP plus carbon dioxide plus vapor, and this is a oxygen dependent process and it occurs in a mitochondria, and due to this reason mitochondria is called as powerhouse of cell, because it is the one which is releasing the energy as a result of oxidation of food. So this is what is an aerobic respiration, and the one who actually carries out is an aerobe like us. So we have an example, man is an example of aerobic respiration because we respire in the presence of oxygen. The another type of respiration is anaerobic. The other type of respiration is anaerobic. Anaerobic one is that which take place in absence of oxygen. So what actually take place in it? So here also you have food in the same form, the simpler form, that is glucose. Again the glycolysis take place, and you know that as a result of glycolysis the glucose gets converted into pyruvic acid. Same thing happens here also. Again it is called as glycolysis. The same term, oxygen independent. So whether the oxygen is present or not doesn't make a difference. First step remains the same for aerobic and the anaerobic. What differ is the second step. Now in the second step there won't be any oxygen because we have seen that it is going to occur in absence of oxygen. So here pyruvic acid is not going to get any oxygen, but still it will get converted and it is going to form energy, but the energy formed by it is only 2 ATPs. How many ATPs? Only 2 ATPs. Along with that we get CO2, and along with that we get some chemical compound. And this chemical compound actually varies. It depends upon that where this anaerobic respiration is being taken place. For example, and one more thing, it is not called as Krebs cycle. Don't get confused. Krebs cycle is only this one in which pyruvic acid gets lysed in presence of oxygen, yielding these things. These are called a Krebs cycle. It doesn't have any special name. It's just the product we have to learn in this. And see, like we are aerobes, as I already told you that man is an aerobe, but still you know that our muscles of leg respire anaerobically. Like when you are exercising, then what happens? Glucose, this glycolysis occur, glucose gets converted into pyruvic acid, and along with that pyruvic acid in absence of oxygen converts to form 2 ATP, CO2, and this chemical compound which is formed is lactic acid. In the muscles of our legs I am talking about. And you know that what is the fate of this lactic acid? This lactic acid will just go into the liver and will get stored. This is the one very important question is formulated on this, which we often get in your paper. Question is that why do you feel fatigue? During vigorous exercise? Like when you are exercising hard, then why you feel fatigue, why you feel restless in that case? So see, the reason behind is that you know that when we are exercising, our muscle of legs respire anaerobically. Our muscle of legs respire anaerobically, and what we are getting actually, per 1 glucose we are getting only 2 ATP, and along with that we get lactic acid, I told you. Right. So when we are exercising, our energy requirement becomes high. We need more energy obviously. So when we are exercising, our energy requirement just rises, it becomes high, but actually we are getting only 2 ATPs per 1 glucose. Like 1 glucose get oxidized to form only 2 ATPs. But when we are exercising, our energy requirement becomes high. So what happens as a result? More and more glucose gets oxidized. More and more glucose start getting oxidized. And as a result, we get more energy, and we get, along with that, we get more lactic acid. So energy we are using because we need that energy when we are exercising. But then what about the lactic acid? The lactic acid so produced is not equal to that means you can say the speed with which it is going to the liver and gets stored is not same. That means production is little faster, and the time it is taking up to move to liver and get stored is slow. So what happens, so when you are exercising, for that moment, for that time period, the lactic acid gets accumulated in your muscles of the legs. And what do you feel as a result? We feel fatigue. So again I am explaining you the answer, just listen to me carefully. When you are exercising, so if you get a question like this, you need to answer in the same way I am telling you. When we are exercising, our energy requirement becomes high. And as we know that in the muscles of our legs respire anaerobically, that is 1 glucose gets break up to form only 2 ATPs, and along with that lactic acid is produced. But when we are exercising, more and more glucose get oxidized in order to meet the energy requirement. And along with that lactic acid is also produced. But for some span of time, that lactic acid gets accumulated in the muscles of leg and we feel fatigue. So this is the reason. But once you stop exercising, you take rest, then what happens? That then the stored lactic acid just move to the liver and gets stored, and the amount which is produced after exercising, that is equal to the amount which is going to the liver, which is getting stored. So no lactic acid gets accumulated in your muscles when you are not exercising. So that is why when you rest, like you exercise vigorously and then you take rest, so after some time you feel okay because the accumulated lactic acid just move to the liver and gets stored. So this is very important, keep in mind. So this is the reason that you feel fatigue during vigorous exercise. So I think you got it, that what is the difference between the aerobic and the anaerobic ones. And here we have an example also. The anaerobic ones, there are many bacteria which respire anaerobically. Moreover, as I told you, the muscles of our legs respire anaerobically, and moreover you know that the fermentation is being carried out. So fermentation is a process by which the alcohols are made in the breweries. So what happened, there we use yeast, so their yeast also carry out fermentation anaerobically. So yeast actually respire anaerobically, it carries out fermentation anaerobically. So as a result, what is produced? It produces ethanol, which you know that is a main constituent of wine, beers and whiskies or hard drinks, we, like commonly if we use the word. So this is what is the difference between the aerobic and the anaerobic one. And if you get a question like this, that out of aerobic and the anaerobic respiration, which is an efficient respiration? So obviously you have seen that in the aerobic respiration, per glucose you get only 38 ATPs, and in anaerobic per glucose you get only 2 ATPs. So that means out of them, which is efficient? Obviously aerobic respiration is much efficient because it is producing a large amount of energy per glucose molecule. That is the 1 glucose yield to produce 38 ATPs. So this is what is the difference between the type of the respiration. So these are the two common types which we found, that is the aerobic and the anaerobic one.